How's that? Can people hear me? All right. You missed my opening joke. I'm so glad. It was terrible. Um, okay, so look, I've got about 12 minutes to try to talk you out of this whole entrepreneurship thing. I tell you, in my experience as a co-founder of Shazam, I was young and naive when I did it, and that's why I said, don't try this at home. Now that I'm older and much wiser, although my wife would argue with that, I just realized that there's so many risks in this game, so much that can go wrong. So much just doesn't play out as you imagine. But, I have to take responsibility for my actions, but I largely blame my co-founders. As you can see, it's a pretty motley crew. This is many years ago. And in particular, my co-founder, Chris, who I'm sitting next to, people ask me sometimes, they say, how did you find your co-founder? And he was my drinking partner, basically. We used to sit around and drink beers and say, oh, it'd be great to be an entrepreneur, Well, yeah, it is great to be an entrepreneur, but we didn't have any ideas, so we'd try to come up with ideas, and most of them were absolutely awful. And I'm so glad that we didn't pursue them. But Chris came up with the idea for Shazam, partly because he didn't know anything about music. He's like, I wonder what that song is. He's like, I wonder what that is. And he's like, oh, wouldn't it be great if one could use a system to identify music? And then he thought, it would be even better if you could use your mobile to identify music. So he told me his idea, and I said, but that's ridiculous. He said, what do you mean it's ridiculous? I said, well, where are we going to find the technology? He's like, oh, we'll just have to invent it. Now, you have to understand, so I'm not technical, Chris is not technical, Philippe is not technical, so this is a non-starter. Luckily, there's one smart guy in that picture, which is Dr. Avery Wang, who actually invented the technology. But I was like, okay, Chris, so let me make sure I understand. So you want to identify any song? So where are we going to find all these songs? And he said, oh, I'm sure we can find them. We'll talk to the record companies. We'll figure it out. So I was like, there's a lot of music out there, and we don't have any music at all. We didn't know anything about the music business. I was like, what about money? We're going to need to raise money. And he said, yeah, well, I'm sure we can figure this out. So being quite analytical, I did a little spreadsheet. I said, chances of inventing the technology, 25%. Chances of finding all the music, I don't know, 30%. So I multiplied the whole thing through, and it came out to chances of doing the whole thing, building the business, making money was 4%. And I thought, yeah, I'll do it. That sounds great. So I quit my job, my well-paid, comfortable job, and I got into business with this lot over here. Now, that was a big mistake. It got worse, because once it became real, then we had to try to find the technology. So the problem was, because we were concerned about confidentiality, so we didn't want to tell anyone the idea. But we wanted to find someone to invent it, which is really quite awkward. And the way it worked back then, people are horrified, by the way. You can see from the gray hair that these are old stories. But Shazam started back in 2000. And in 2000, smartphones didn't exist. The text message had just been invented. There was GSM compression, and the way Shazam worked was, if you wanted to identify a song, you dialed a number on your mobile, on your old classic mobile, which would make a voice call to an IVR system, which would then hang up after 30 seconds, go crunch, crunch, crunch in the background, and then come back with a text message with the name of the song and the artist. So we tried to find somebody to invent the technology which would make it all work, and basically everyone said, get out. You're mad, you're bonkers, what are you talking about? There was one guy on the planet called Dr. Avery Wang who said, we said, that's it, that's our business partner. He's the man, you're hired, So Avery came on board, and he didn't know what he was doing either. He just let himself into this mad business with the three of us, all MBAs. So we're running around writing business plans and financial models and projecting global revenues of hundreds of millions of dollars long before we'd even got the technology. And basically, Avery came to the point where he was about to give up. He's like, I can't invent this frigging thing. It's never going to work. But it's slightly awkward because Chris and Philippe and I were quite determined, sort of like, gung-ho, yeah, we're going to do it, And so he was like preparing his I give up speech. Meanwhile, we're running around working on the next part of the business, which is need some money. Um, and as it happens, we basically tried to talk to angels in the music field, in the mobile domain, anyone who knew anything at all. And they all said pretty much the same thing. They're like, wait a second, so how's this going to work again? And we're like, oh, they don't get it, I mean, it's so obvious. Like, look at the spreadsheet. It has all the answers right there. And miraculously, Avery had a breakthrough where he invented the technology. And people sometimes say, how does it work? And I have no idea at all how it actually works. But it's really complicated, but it works. So we're like, great. He did this in 2 or 3 months. So we had a demo which we could show our investors, and they were suitably impressed. There was one thing among the many things which we hadn't planned properly, which was the timing of the venture. So in 2000 was good. 2001, not so good. Internet bubble, boom. And there was literally blood on the streets, all the startups who had been working so hard to get to that point. And we needed to raise $8.5 million on the back of a bunch of PowerPoint and a demo which we had put together, which was pretty hard work. And I think at the time in London, there were about 53 VCs, and 50 of them rejected us. So we took the other 3. But like, they are the smart ones, not the other 50 who rejected us, Don't really understand what's gone wrong there. And then we managed to get the business started. So this is why I say, looking back now, I thought, oh yeah, we're going to make this happen. We're just going to do it. I look back and I shake my head. What were we thinking? This is an example. Like, these are the people we hired with all that money. I apologize to our investors, but the reality is that we were lucky once we had the funding because we had the pick of the bunch in terms of fantastic talent. We had some of the best engineers. We hired some people who worked for the company where I worked before, so I knew them. And we also hired my cousin, who's in the picture, who started dating one of my co-founders, but I'd probably better not get into that. I think that the way things played themselves out was just a combination of circumstances and a time and a place, but we never thought, I wonder if we should give up, or are we nuts? We just sort of kept going, and it was great fun. We worked really long hours. We did crazy things. We tried to get hold of a mobile operator because in the early days before smartphones, the way the service worked, you dialed 2580, which was the 4 digits straight down the middle of your mobile. And we had to do a deal with all the operators in the UK to get that short code. And one of the operators just refused to return our phone calls. So we called him 44 times before we managed to reach him on the phone. He's like, oh yeah, let's meet up next Tuesday and talk about it. We're like, what about the other 43 voicemails which we left? You didn't even mention it, But crazy stuff like that. And at the end of the day, what actually happened? Well, as you can see from this graph, when I was there in the early days, absolutely nothing happened. Frankly, nobody cared, I talked to people about, they're like, what do you do? I'm like, I'm an entrepreneur. They're like, what does that mean? Are you unemployed? I'm like, no, I'm starting a business, And so this is how it works. They're like, it's never going to work, Like, why not? Why is it not going to work? They're like, no one cares about identifying music. And they were right. Basically, nothing happened. So the biggest contributor to Shazam's success is Steve Jobs. When the iPhone launched and the App Store launched, then finally the service found the right platform. And people are like, oh, this is sort of cool. I'm like, long after I was gone, by the way. So I went and worked for Save the Children after I left Shazam. Just in terms of just numbers, for instance, as you can see, it took 10 years to get to the first billion users of Shazam. The next billion Shazams took a year. The next billion took 2 months. And luckily, no one can blame me for that because I wasn't there. But that's what happened sort of over time. And as I reflect back, I think, gosh, I'm glad that I'm not going through that experience again, but I enjoy telling the stories from the old days. And I think somebody said to me once, this is a Mark Twain quote, so it's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog. And besides all the fun that we had with my co-founders, building the business, hiring friends and family, I think that's the one thing which stuck with me, which is to really go for it. I enjoyed my naivete. I didn't listen to old guys like me saying, "Don't try this at home." So that's the thought I'd leave you all with. Enjoy your passion, enjoy your obsession. Make the most of it. Thank you very much.